Okay, thank you very much. I think we should get started. First of all, thank you to all those that are in attendance so far. It's great to have you here for this super event. Just to check you are in the right place, this is a webinar delivered by the Investment Climate Reform Facility, which is going to focus on business environment reform for youth entrepreneurship in the ACP region. Now, my name is Owen Dowsett. I am a technical expert within the ICR Facility, and I'm based in the UK. And you will be hearing much more about the ICR Facility as the next sort of 90 minutes or so progresses. Now, a few things just in terms of housekeeping to let you know. We have a French translator in this room, so there should be options for you to connect into the French translation if that is what you need. Otherwise, we will be delivering this in English. We have had over 200 registrations for this event, and we are welcoming people from the public sector, from the private sector, from civil society, from all sorts of different organizations, business member organizations, chambers of commerce, from all around the world, and especially from colleagues in Africa, the Caribbean, the Pacific, and in Europe as well. So a big welcome to you all, and I'm really excited about this event and some of the experts that we're going to be bringing insights from today. Now, just to reiterate the kind of where this webinar is coming from, like I said, you will hear more about the Investment Climate Reform Facility a bit later, but there's some information on your screen about it. It is co-funded by the European Union and the Organization of African, Caribbean and Pacific States under the 11th European Development Fund, and also the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, which is BMZ, and the British Council. Now, the ICR facility is implemented by GIZ. Please, could I ask everybody to mute their microphones so we don't get feedback? Thank you. There's a few people that haven't got their microphones muted, so please do that. Francois and James Duru and Bernardine, I can see that your microphones aren't muted. Thank you very much. That's very helpful. Now, the ICR facility is implemented by GIZ, by the British Council, Expertise France and SNV. This specific intervention is led by the Challenges Group on behalf of the British Council. There's some additional information there, and like I say, you will hear more about the ICR facility going forward. This is part of a knowledge series specifically focused on youth. So there are in future going to be some reports and webinars around youth employment and around youth representation in public-private dialogues. Today is all about youth entrepreneurship. Now, just to speak you through the running order for today, we have some introductions and opening remarks currently going on, and then I will be passing to our lead researcher who has delivered the report that we will be hearing about and has carried out various research with youth entrepreneurs and other people in the ecosystem. So we'll be hearing from him. That's Stephen Hunt. We will then be inviting responses from the ICR partners, the donors, and I think the European Commission will be represented, as well as the Organization of African, Caribbean and Pacific States. So we will hear from them. And then we will move on to the panel discussion and invite reflections from various perspectives from 4 different experts that we have brought in to the loop to discuss these findings. So really looking forward to that. There will then be an opportunity to ask any immediate sort of clarifications and questions that come from that, but that's not going to be our main focus for the questions. There'll be an opportunity for that a bit later. We will then invite somebody who works centrally for the Investment Climate Reform Facility to talk a little bit about the opportunity that it provides for delivering technical assistance to various countries across Africa, the Caribbean and Pacific around business environment reform. We are then going to ask people to break out into breakout sessions. There will be 4 different breakout rooms with a focus on different themes and from different perspectives. And you will be able to select yourselves into the one that's of most interest to you. It's worth saying that one of those breakout rooms will be conducted in French. So if you're French speaking, then that will be the one to go to. I will then invite some feedback from a suitable person from that breakout group to feedback into the main session, and we will have an opportunity to reflect on some of those key discussions that were taken forward in the rooms. And finally, we will just begin to tie things together, provide some concluding remarks, and also highlight some of the upcoming opportunities and next steps and what's going to happen next. So I think that is it. Please jump in, any of my colleagues, if I've forgotten anything vital. Please do also use chat to introduce yourselves and to ask any questions as they go along, and we will keep a note of those, or to highlight any technical issues. And also, please, throughout this, do keep in mind any opportunities from your own experience that you see for support in this area. We would very much like to hear about what the challenges are that people are facing in the development of the ecosystem within different countries around the world, and keep in mind whether the ICR facility can support those going forward. So I think that is it. And I think without further ado, I would like to pass to the lead author and lead researcher of the report around which this webinar is focused. And that is Stephen Hunt, who has been working on behalf of the Challenges Group for the ICR facility in delivering this work. So Stephen, without further ado, please add anything further. And Mboka, please could I ask you to mute your microphone? Thank you very much. Stephen, please.
Great, thank you. Can I just get a thumbs up from you, Owen, if you can hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Great, thanks. Hi everyone, it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Stephen Hunt. I'm a youth entrepreneurship specialist. I have a background working for think tanks and INGOs in the research and learning space around youth entrepreneurship policy and practice. I've been working with the Challenges Group as a consultant, supporting them on this piece of work, and it's a privilege to be able to talk to you all today about what we've been doing. To start with, I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about the background of the paper and how the research was conducted. I'm then going to talk you through some of the summative findings and high-level takeaways and recommendations that are discussed in detail in the paper. My hope for this session is that you will all kind of identify an area of interest from the findings that we discuss in the presentation that will encourage you to go into the report and take a further look for yourself at all of the learnings and examples of different business environment reform activities that governments and other stakeholders are implementing across the ACP region. This piece of work was conducted with a detailed desk review by myself and support from my colleagues. So I just want to acknowledge Doreen and Lynn. Thank you for your contributions. And the desk review was supported with the conduction of 33 expert interviews. These were interviews with key experts from the public and private sector regions, all with specialisms in supporting youth entrepreneurship environment and ecosystem building. And the interviews formed a really fundamental part of this work, helping us to identify the key priorities for reform, the opportunities that different regions have to support young entrepreneurs, as well as key learnings and initiatives from across the different regions that can hope to inspire and form ideas for the readers of the paper to take away ideas and opportunities for their own countries. Of all of the so this slide, for the majority of this piece of work, we have presented sort of high-level findings, and we do want to just acknowledge that there are very broad differences in regional differences and gender differences in youth entrepreneurship across the region. We have tried to balance the data and the evidence of that in the actual report, but these slides are very summative, and we would encourage you to go to the paper if you're interested in any more detail. So broadly, the trends of youth entrepreneurship across the ACP region. Young people, sorry, could I ask whoever that is to put themselves on mute? Owen, I can't see who those speakers are, so could you just field that one for me?
It's done, yeah.
Great, thank you. So young people make up a large share of entrepreneurial activity across the ACP region. Most early stage and small business activity is often driven by young people. and across the region, on average, around 1/3 of young people are engaged in some form of entrepreneurship. We acknowledge that there are weak private sectors and poor regulatory environments across the ACP, which can limit formal employment opportunities, and as a result, entrepreneurship is often seen as a viable form of work for most young people. However, we also want to recognise that entrepreneurship is also a choice, and when we looked at sort of the motivations of entrepreneurship across young people throughout the ACP region, data from the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor highlights that a lot of entrepreneurial choice and from young people is often opportunity driven. That means that whilst entrepreneurship might be an opportunity or the only viable opportunity for some, that doesn't necessarily mean that the motivations are from a necessity perspective, and that actually a lot of opportunity motivated young entrepreneurs go on to be very successful. And with the right support and enabling environments, we think that there is a really important opportunity to harness that potential of young people. Whilst across genders, we found that both young men and women predominantly pursue entrepreneurial activities through being opportunity motivated. Young women came out as being more likely to pursue entrepreneurship out of necessity than men. We found that young entrepreneurs also, in terms of barriers to doing business, we also found that young entrepreneurs tend to experience very similar barriers to doing business as other adults, and that's to be expected in certain business environments. However, age and context can manifest barriers differently for young people compared to older adults, which can put them at certain disadvantage when competing to start and grow their businesses. Young people, for example, may have less established networks, they may have less collateral, they may have less access to capital, and in some cases they may also lack skills and experience. When we talk about asking the question of what barriers are specific to doing business that particularly affect young people, our interviews and research highlighted some of the more common barriers presented on this slide. We found that young people often face complex and cumbersome administrative procedures to start and to grow businesses. Similarly, young people reported having a lack of access to appropriate knowledge, finance and collateral, and relevant business development support from the public and private sector to help them navigate their entrepreneurial journeys. A number of young people reported facing very saturated markets or unfair market competition from market entry or from competing with established firms. Young people also face inadequate protection from economic downturns. And this is particularly important for young people in the ACP region, where COVID or climate change can manifest certain vulnerabilities that young people are less able to weather than adults. And this is often mirrored in the youth labour market in general, where a lot of young people tend to find work in more precarious and vulnerable forms of employment. And similarly, we found that there's a number of different gender biases and discrimination across local business environments more broadly. Now, when we look at the youth employment policy environment across the ACP, it's important to understand, firstly, looking at the broader policy enabling environment for entrepreneurial ecosystems and the entrepreneurialism of a certain economy, as well as then thinking about the policy frameworks in place to support and enable young people to pursue economic opportunities. When we were exploring the broader policy environment for entrepreneurship, with some exceptions, most of the research that we found highlights that enabling ecosystems for entrepreneurship in ACP regions still remain nascent or in their early stages of maturity. A mature enabling entrepreneurial ecosystem is often more so conducive to successful entrepreneurship, as we see in other economies. But unfavourable conditions for entrepreneurship and scaling can immediately present barriers for young people on their entrepreneurial journeys. We also found that this was particularly the case in areas like the Pacific. There's a recent report by UNCDF that did an ecosystem mapping of different entrepreneurial ecosystems, and their findings mirror this piece of finding from the Pacific region. The broader policy enabling environment impacts young entrepreneurs in different ways. And some of the common challenges that we found that were more specific to young people included an overemphasis on supply side reforms, Often policy reform focused on youth entrepreneurship or initiatives targeting young people in the labour market focus on the supply of youth labour. This could be manifesting in youth entrepreneurship reforms that target skills, that target capital, that target training and mentorship. Whilst this is all really important, it needs to be balanced with demand side policy reforms that can help overcome certain constraints that young people may face when entering markets. For example, saturated sectors or the demand for sort of goods and services and innovation are key challenges to helping youth entrepreneurial ecosystems diversify and mature. Similarly, many countries still lack a comprehensive MSME and entrepreneurship policies. For example, in Africa, we found that over half of African nations have some form of MSME and entrepreneurship policy and guidelines, but that still means that half of these countries do not have them. Where policy and guidance do exist, these policies can often lack more youth-specific considerations, which can undermine key support needs that young people on their entrepreneurial journeys may require. We found that more youth-specific considerations regarding both policy design and implementation are needed in order to make the policy conditions for MSME and entrepreneurial environments more conducive for young people. And one challenge which was exemplified with this was in the Pacific region, where we identified that there is a key policy blind spot for supporting indigenous young people to start and grow their business. And we would encourage you to look at the report if that is of interest. And additionally, support for youth entrepreneurship is when we think about how entrepreneurship and youth entrepreneurship agendas get adopted into government policy or embedded into institutions and coordinated. A lot of the youth entrepreneurship strategies are often driven by ministries such as Ministry of Youth, Ministry of Gender, Youth and Sports. However, we found in our interviews and research that a number of these different ministries can end up having a siloed experience of youth entrepreneurship policy, which can lead to a breakdown in effective coordination and alignment with youth entrepreneurship objectives that connect with a country's economic growth agenda. Ministries that are responsible often need to have better alignment with ministries that have a key stake in supporting young people. In one interview that we identified this being a particular issue was with an interviewee based in the Caribbean region, who said that the lack of institutional support and coordination across different ministries and national agencies ended up creating a phenomena of a divorce between youth empowerment and youth entrepreneurship. And this mirrors a lot of other findings that we found also in the Pacific region. And in order to, and then finally, in order to sort of overcome some of these challenges within sort of young people doing business to starting and growing their ventures, as well as supporting the maturity and evolution of youth entrepreneurship policy and business environments. Based on our research, we identified 4 key recommendations or themes of reform that we encourage policymakers and stakeholders to pay attention to. This first one is to promote the integration of youth and gender-based entrepreneurship objectives more thoroughly into national agencies and economic planning. The second is to develop MSME and entrepreneurship policy and guidelines that provide stronger and more targeted support for youth-led enterprises and entrepreneurs. We would call for people to optimize regulatory reforms to better support youth entrepreneurship. And finally, promote the enhancement of coordination and monitoring of existing reforms that have some support for youth entrepreneurs at a country level. Now, in terms of calls to action and practical examples of where this can be actioned for policymakers, we have identified in the policy, in the paper, there is a detailed discussion of each of these recommendations that we encourage you to explore. So and here is a summary of some of the key messages that we have coming through the report. And if any of these are of particular interest, we encourage you to go to the report to look at this in more detail, where you'll find examples and illustrations of where this recommendation is more grounded. But firstly, in order to integrate youth and gender-based entrepreneurship objectives into agencies and economic planning, we encourage policymakers to invest in aligning youth entrepreneurship priorities to key ministries and public agencies. This can ensure that young entrepreneurs are better positioned to benefit from and contribute to economic development, as well as governments can begin to better harness the opportunities that are afforded to them by their large youth populations. Similarly, securing cross-ministerial buy-in can be difficult, and policymakers should consider exploring different mechanisms that can help create this sort of coordination mechanisms that can centralize key functions for supporting youth entrepreneurship. One example that we identified in our interviews was a conversation with South Africa. Whilst it's not an OACPS member country, it is illustrative of a really strong example of where these types of reforms are being implemented to support youth entrepreneurship. And in South Africa, a number of the youth entrepreneurship objectives have been centralized under the President's Office, which helps to harmonize both its coordination and holding different ministries and agencies accountable to the delivery and support for young entrepreneurs. We also identified that holding governments and different ministries to account is also important, but also other reforms that can support youth and women include bolstering existing structures and institutions. It takes a lot of time to evolve ministries and build the capacity of institutional staff and processes. We're very aware of that, but one of the ways in which we would encourage policymakers to explore short-term actions to help reform the environment through which young people navigate their entrepreneurial journeys is through promoting mainstreaming of youth and gender objectives within institutions. And this could look like gender or youth mainstreaming in the policies and the process and the procedures, as well as providing staff training on the key challenges and opportunities of working with young people, particularly. In Fiji,
Stephen, just to jump in here, please could you just speak a little bit closer to the microphone for the benefit of the translator? I know there's not too much to go, but just in your remaining comments, thank you.
Sure, no problem. And so one of the areas where we saw a significant opportunity for improving the conditions for young people starting a business was in Fiji, where one of the key barriers that came through in our interviews for young entrepreneurs in the Fiji business environment was engaging with civil servants is often intimidating for young people, and young people may lack the information that they need to work with civil servants to access the services that they need, and providing training here for civil servants on how to engage with young people and how to understand the needs that young people face when navigating their entrepreneurial journeys was a key call for reform. And this is one illustration of where we would see something like this taking place. In terms of developing MSME and entrepreneurship policy guidelines that support stronger support for youth-led enterprises, we encourage governments to build effective MSE and entrepreneurship policy broadly, but particularly considering with particular consideration to supporting young people, where they become a key contributor and beneficiary to the design and implementation of that policy. Current policy and guidance that we have seen from different countries can often lack the consideration for key areas such as youth aspirations, as well as not address key challenges more pertinent to different groups of young people. We see that investing in a pathway-based approach or a pipeline-based approach of supporting young people's entrepreneurial journeys is a key framework for enabling this to help young people in the policy design process. Similarly, policymakers should consider approaches that segment strategy and support for different young entrepreneurs. Young people are all very different. They vary by age, they vary by gender, they vary by education and experience, and they also vary by entrepreneurial type. And one of the key areas where we've seen particular success in supporting different firms to thrive and to grow is through taking segmented approaches to strategy, such as clustering, and providing bespoke support for different stages of young people's entrepreneurial journeys. And so we encourage policymakers to explore and innovate their policy mechanisms to adopt these types of strategies. And similarly, we encourage policymakers to ensure that the entrepreneurship is grounded in the contextual experiences of young people. There are some experiences that we have identified through our research where entrepreneurship is understood very culturally different to the way in which policy is designed. For example, entrepreneurship is very culturally different to Indigenous people in the Pacific Islands than it is to some young people in urban metropolises in Africa. And all of those cultural nuances need to be captured in policy effectively in order to make sure that the support is appropriate and aligned with the business objectives of those young entrepreneurs. Thirdly, to optimize regulatory reforms to better support young entrepreneurs, there are different ways that policymakers can adopt reform activities for this purpose. For example, simple goals such as reducing the time and cost of starting a business still remains a key and important challenge for most ACP governments. And where we identify that infrastructure of governments in certain ACP countries may be requiring additional support, investing in digital solutions for startup processes has often shown significant improvements for young people accessing formal support from governments. One example that we talk about in the paper was the experience of UNCTAD, where UNCTAD assisted both Mali and Benin governments in building digital business registries, and respectively that led to a 181% increase of young people registering a business and in Benin, and subsequently a 263% increase of young people in Mali registering their business within the first 2 years. Accessing support through these digital platforms is often more appropriate for young people, particularly those who are based outside of the urban areas, as young people are often more familiar with navigating support on digital platforms and are more familiar with using digital technology for accessing key support that they need to grow their businesses as well. Other areas of reform, such as promoting initiatives like one-stop shops, can also help support young people to access the support services that they need. Whilst one-stop shop initiatives have been used by various different groups and for different types of entrepreneurs, they can be a particularly important mechanism for centralizing support for young people. Similarly, we have seen examples of where creating one-stop shops can create early stage and valuable spaces for governments to test and to build different broader support functions for young people. And finally, affirmative action policies can also be important for securing opportunities for young entrepreneurs, such as preferential procurement, but it is important that these types of reforms are not copy and paste regulatory solutions. Young people can experience different challenges and have different reactions to such policies, and young people, for example, may be skeptical or hesitant to trust certain government initiatives, and so may not choose to opt in to access certain benefits. And so it's important that governments understand the entire user journey of young people when it comes to accessing such regulatory opportunities, such as preferential procurement, and to ensure that all of the support is in place, such as all government staff are effectively trained, and that the support is pitched at the right level for young people, people with disabilities, and women to access. And finally, one of the key areas of reform that came out quite strongly in our paper is the importance of strengthening monitoring and coordination of different youth entrepreneurship services. Monitoring and coordination of youth entrepreneurship reforms remain a key challenge for most ACP regions, and often data and evaluation of key policy or regulatory reforms can be fragmented or incidental. Where this data does not feed into innovation and design, it can perpetuate and it can risk perpetuating initiatives without fully understanding the potential for their impact. In one interview that we conducted with a group of African business development support specialists, they identified this as being a continual challenge for most of the continent. And they said that to improve the maturity and evolution of youth entrepreneurship business environments, it's essential that monitoring and coordination of data on reforms is strengthened. Often, in similar circumstances where governments may lack capacity to centrally coordinate youth entrepreneurship agendas, these agendas are adopted or led by different donors and third sector organizations. These can be a brilliant mechanism for starting to evolve the youth entrepreneurship business environments, but without the effective coordination, they can end up being barriers to growth. For example, short-term funding cycles, dependency on foreign-led donor technical assistance, and the lack of nationally capacitated organizations to take on key responsibilities of the youth entrepreneurship ecosystem can and do remain limiting barriers for youth entrepreneurship. Therefore, we would encourage policymakers and partners to invest in at least 3 core areas, which include evolving monitoring systems and indicators to integrate youth and gender-sensitive entrepreneurship objectives into existing infrastructure. Secondly, we encourage the investment in long-term capacity building initiatives of national and local-led organizations that can help improve the capacity for local organizations to adopt key functions of the youth entrepreneurship business support environment. And finally, coordinate existing donor and third sector entrepreneurship initiatives, whether that be through a central coordinating mechanism, policy, or broader initiative and commitment to youth entrepreneurship in key areas. Where all of this sort of lands for you all, the paper is very action oriented, and it is peppered with different examples and cases of positive illustrations of where people and policy have been successful in addressing key barriers. We encourage you to read the report and identify where you can take away key learnings for yourself and for your own context, and also to engage with the ICR facility, who are available to support you in implementing business environment reforms for young entrepreneurs. I thank you for listening, and I hope it was insightful and helpful. And I look forward to our discussion in the breakout rooms. And for now, I'll pass back over to Owen.
Thank you very, very much, Stephen. That was a comprehensive summary, which was very much appreciated, and certainly highlighted a lot of the issues that I imagine many of our audience will have had experience of and will identify with. So thank you very much for that. And as Stephen said, I very much echo the sentiment of going and doing some further reading and digging a little bit more into the report, because there's some great data in there. There are some great examples in there and great pointers for further action about how to really address this bottleneck of youth entrepreneurship, and really making the most of that, and taking experience from places where it's worked and learning from places where perhaps it hasn't worked so well. Now, to offer some further perspectives on this, in the immediate moment, I believe I'm just going to, I was under the impression that I was going to invite some comments from the ICR partners. Yes, okay. So fantastic. Before we get to the panel discussion, I would like to invite Johanna Cahiluoto to please come forward. She is representing the European Commission, and hopefully I've got her surname right, but I'm sure I haven't, so please correct me, Johanna. But great to have some brief words from you, reflections on the report and commitments of the European Commission in this area.
Thank you, Owen. You did a great job with my name. It's challenging, and thank you also, Stephen, for the summary of the report and all the work on the report in general. As Owen presented, I'm Johanna Cahiluoto. I'm from the European Commission. I'm from the Directorate General for International Partnerships for the European Commission, and it's my privilege to work from our side with the ICR facility together with my colleague Miguel. So first, let me just thank you again, all the ICR team, for the great report, and also already in advance for our esteemed panelists here today, and everyone who joined the discussion today. As it's been very concisely already mentioned by Stephen, this youth entrepreneurship is a shared priority. It's important in many of the ACP countries, and it's also a priority for us here at the European Commission. But at the same time, as we see from the report, there are many challenges still, but also good practices that we've been able to gather together with the ICR facility that we can all learn from and start tackling together with the ICR facility and in each of us in our work. On our side, at the European Commission, we work on this topic with our within the framework of our youth action plan. This is something new to show the priority to pay specific attention to youth from our side. It's a plan that has been launched since last year, and it's as I said, it's something that is going to guide our work for and with youth across the world. Also to step up our work, specifically looking at young entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship and early stage businesses. We've also recently launched a Team Europe initiative called Investing in Young Businesses in Africa, IYBA, where we're working closely together with a number of our EU member states, which share the priority on young entrepreneurs. So this is really topical for us here at the Commission. We're really looking into coordinating our efforts to work on different levels to support young entrepreneurs, and we have also specific objectives to look into specifically young women entrepreneurs, which I think we're going to be hearing also today. And what Stephen already as well highlighted, that there's some specific barriers for young women entrepreneurs. So this is something that we are also having very closely our eyes on at the Commission. This is also something that is important for us within the EU's new Global Gateway strategy, which is our new European strategy to boost smart, clean and secure links in digital, in energy and in transport sectors, as well as improvements and strengthening the health, education and research systems across the world. And to foster sustainable investments in these areas, of course, we need a thriving private sector and suppliers on the ground to deliver on these objectives. And of course, youth is a key contributor to this and an opportunity to further this agenda. So we're really delighted on this ICR work on the topic, and we're looking forward to working more on this topic and the discussions and hearing from each of your concrete experiences in your organizations in this area. So I thank all the team, and I think I hand over to Escipion. I think Escipion from OACPS is joining also in the thank yous. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. Yes, please. Escipion is here from the Organization of African, Caribbean and Pacific States. So super to have you here, Escipion, and it'd be great to have some words from you, please.
Thank you very much, Owen, and thanks, Joanna, for that nice introduction. For those that do not know us, the Organization of African, Caribbean and Pacific States was created in 1975, and today proudly groups 79 states from Africa, the Caribbean, where I'm from, and the Pacific. Since our beginning, we have the privilege to be partnering with the European Union, with us here today again. And what we do together is to promote the gradual integration of our countries to the world economy with the objective of reducing and eventually eradicating poverty. In this quest that we're doing together, youth and women employment are at the center of all of our actions. In fact, to accomplish this dream of really eradicating poverty in our countries, mainly through private sector engagement, the European Commission and us, we are implementing a series of programs for around 650 million euros, divided in several components. The first is enhancing the business climate, where ICR falls very well, and that's what they're trying to do, have discussions towards enhancing the business climate. We also support intermediary organizations, especially in the work of having public-private sector dialogue. In this regard, we have created the OECPS Business Forum to allow the private sector to have a say in the discussion on policy and programs being put in place. We also support the informal economy and smaller companies through direct assistance, and we supply financing. What we try to do to promote this, even if 650 million euros looks like a lot of money, is a lot of challenges that we have, as has been explained today by Stephen. So we're really promoting the sharing of best practices, ensuring market access, and overall having this type of discussions that we're having today. I am particularly, I would say, pleased by the way that we're working with youth. Youth is the future, and I am proud to see that in many of our countries, youth prefers to create their own employment rather than to be just employees. However, as the report from Stephen shows, informality is a big deal. In fact, a lot of our youth entrepreneurs don't arrive really to formalize themselves. And for me, having lived this from my own country and region, we have to have a more, I would say, coherent view of government when we're talking about informality. Most companies see our government officials rather than they see them as tax collectors. And a lot of companies don't want to formalize themselves because they don't see any benefit from it. What we're really trying to do with the European Commission and our series of programs that we have is to change that mindset of public employees from tax collector to service provider. If the government can allow and facilitate really the work of its staff working in promoting SME development, to work hand in hand with the SMEs, the informality will disappear. People will see more reasons to formalize themselves and will really be protected, because formalizing a company also allows them, among others, to have credits and other things. Another thing that I really liked about Stephen's work is that what he talked about collateral. Collateral is a big issue for every business, and more so for young businesses that don't have a credit record. So I think that these are things that we have to tackle together. In my previous life, I have worked a lot with incubators in different countries. I believe that in the OACPS, we don't have that many incubators as you might see in the United States or Central America. So this is something that I would like to see in the discussions, how we can promote these business incubators, and how also, one of the main things that I saw also in the report is when Stephen is talking about supply side against demand side constraints. I do believe that, yes, we have concentrated a lot in supply side constraints. And today, we also have to change the mentality of our people. We have to believe in ourselves. We as consumers from our own countries, we have to buy local. During the COVID, we saw this, that actually people were looking to buy in Europe to local production. In our country, still not there. When we go to the supermarket and we see products from our own country or region and products from abroad, even if the products from abroad might be more expensive, we tend to buy them because we believe they are better. And that is something that we have to change in mentality. We have to continue working in quality infrastructure like we're doing with the European Union to ensure to our consumers that the local products are as good as the foreign ones. And we also have to change our mindset and believe in ourselves and start buying local. So I think that the youth is the future. It's a collective effort. I consider myself a youth, but my kids don't consider myself as a young person. But well, that's a question of mentality. What I want to say is that for the young entrepreneurs that are here, we believe in you. You have to believe in yourself, and we're there to help you in this quest. Of course, the help that we can provide, together with the European Commission and ICR and our partners like BMZ and Enterprise France and the British Council and SNV will not be enough, but it's a little push on the way. Just to tell you that this program is also coordinated with a program of women entrepreneurs, young women entrepreneurs, executed by the Tony Elumelo Foundation with ICR, and we look forward really to hearing from you and supporting you. So thanks a lot for the opportunity, and we're really proud of our young entrepreneurs, especially the women ones. Not that we have anything against the males, of course. So at your service in Brussels.
Thank you so much, Escipion. That's fantastic, and as ever, you bring lots of passion and energy to the debate. So that's super. Thank you also to Joanna for your words as well. Now, without further ado, because I fear that we might be a little bit behind schedule here, I wish to turn to our panel of super experts brought from around the world with all sorts of experience to hand, and certainly some more perspectives on this topic. And this will really provide the platform for the breakout sessions further on in the schedule. So how this is going to work is I'm going to invite each of our experts currently on screen to provide 5 minutes or so of reflections from their particular perspective and experience on some of the things that were highlighted in Stephen's paper. And I'm specifically going to be directing them towards the question of how can stakeholders engage business environment reform for the benefit of young entrepreneurs. Now, I propose that I just introduce you one at a time and then invite that person to provide their reflections, and then I'll move on to the next one. So in the first instance, we're going to turn to Christina Hunt. She is a young entrepreneur and founder of Creative Edge Incorporated, which is a boutique marketing agency in Barbados. She has been recognized as a young leader of the Americas and one of the top 30 Barbadian millennial entrepreneurs under 30. And Christina will reflect on how BER can better serve young entrepreneurs from that young entrepreneurial perspective. So Christina, I'm going to offer you the floor for 5 minutes, please. So for some reflections, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. It's good morning here where I am in Barbados, in sunny Barbados. Thank you so much for having me this morning. I'm really, really pleased to be here on the panel to share my views. Entrepreneurship is something that is very important to me. I knew from a very young age I wanted to be an entrepreneur. So this has been my entire journey, you know, from leaving school up till now. And it has been a very challenging and rewarding journey. So my thoughts this morning are, as a young entrepreneur who has many passions in terms of wanting to start many different types of businesses, you know, always seeing opportunities for, okay, well, how could we solve that problem? What kind of framework or business could be put in place to solve a need in society? So that has been, you know, what has really driven me as a young entrepreneur, you know, seeing problems in society and wanting to solve them. Like, for example, seeing many other entrepreneurs have great ideas, but lacking the support or the know-how to let people know that they have this great business. And, you know, I'm just wanting to jump in and help people from a marketing standpoint. So that's why I ended up starting my marketing company. As an entrepreneur, it has been very challenging, specifically to find funding, which is why I think this conversation is so extremely important. I think that the Barbados government has done really well, especially in recent times. I mean, from a broad educational standpoint, there are a lot of, you know, we have access to free education up to a certain point. But in recent times specifically, we have had access to a lot of entrepreneurship training programs, which is amazing because it helps people who have just an idea and lack direction to go to multiple agencies across our government to get education, hands-on training. So there are a lot of resources there. However, when it comes to the actual implementation of the business, the harsh reality is that a lot of people need funding, and a lot of the times it's not there. So I think that, you know, while the traditional model might be, okay, you go to the bank for a loan, we know the challenges in terms of going to the banks for loans. We understand that banks are private entities and their priority is, you know, to make profits. So they can't just, you know, hand out money willy-nilly. So for me, my perspective is, because, you know, governments are always limited in terms of how they can spread resources to help people in different needs across society. So as entrepreneurs, you also can't then just expect that, oh, you're going to go to the government and just get a bunch of free money to start your business. So then for me personally, and this is what I have found in my journey, also doing my own research and talking to lots of entrepreneurs, I feel personally that the solution is in private funding. I think that the solution is in people who have resources that they can invest in young entrepreneurs, with the understanding that, you know, as a person, you want a good return on your investment too. So I think that a lot of this would be solved, a lot of the need for funding could be solved through having access to private investment that comes along with the training, so that, you know, on the investor side, you're confident that, you know, this is going to lead somewhere, but on the entrepreneur side, you're confident that you're actually able to access funds. And that's why for me, I know that when I make it, so to speak, that's one of the things that's going to be critical in my journey, being able to have such a big empire that I can reach back and help others who went through the same things that I went through and make their journey a little easier along this entrepreneurship journey. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much, Christina. I believe you actually came in slightly under 5 minutes, so fantastic performance. Thank you very much. And very interesting, some of the things you referred to there. In terms of funding and finance, it might be an opportune moment just to highlight that we at the ICR facility have previously done a knowledge series on innovative finance. So if you follow the link to the ICR Knowledge Hub, which hopefully somebody can put a link to again in the chat, there are some resources there. I guess I'm especially thinking about some of those people with a role to develop ecosystems for young entrepreneurs and those ones that can influence the system in terms of providing more funding and finance opportunities, and certainly not the one-size-fits-all funding and finance opportunities, because I think a key thing that we're learning here is that young entrepreneurs and other groups of entrepreneurs need all sorts of different tailored products available to their particular stages and sectors and geographical areas and so on and so forth. I'm in danger of rambling, so I will stop there and pass on to somebody who certainly knows a lot more about all this than me and is similarly based in the Caribbean. And this is Cardell Ferguson. Now, Cardell is General Manager of Barbados Youth Business Trust, Coordinator of Youth Business Caribbean, and Managing Director for Global Entrepreneurship Network in Barbados. She has vast experience supporting inclusive private sector development for young entrepreneurs across the Caribbean, and she will be discussing opportunities for strengthening private sector reforms that support young entrepreneurs. So she's very much going to bring a perspective from the private sector on supporting youth entrepreneurship. So Cardell, it's super to have you with us, and I offer the floor to you, please.
So good morning, everyone. As was said, I'm from Barbados. And one of the things, so my perspective would be on the support of entrepreneurs from the private sector. So we've been working with entrepreneurs now for the past 30 years, supporting them with all of the needs that they have in terms of setting up businesses. That comes with a lot of experience. And so hence, let me start by saying that in the Caribbean, we have a plethora of support organizations, of entities that would be there to help entrepreneurs. As it relates to regulatory environment, we are still in a very young stage as it relates to having the right environment for entrepreneurs to thrive. We have found that over the years that entrepreneurs, although we hear a lot about entrepreneurs being given the chance to grow, a lot of the times when they get started in business, they don't have what they need, that enabling environment to grow. So Youth Business Caribbean, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the organizations that I'm involved with. Youth Business Caribbean is a consortium of youth business programs across 8 Caribbean countries. And what we are seeking to do is to provide a hand-holding environment for entrepreneurs to thrive. So we provide them with training, we provide them with business development support, we provide them with networking support, mentoring, and also we help them to access finance. Over the years, we have seen that entrepreneurship has an opportunity to transform the lives of our young people. In the Caribbean, more than a quarter of our young persons are unemployed. And so entrepreneurship provides an opportunity for them to find an avenue for growth and for the development of themselves and their family. In the Caribbean also, we have been trying to help our entrepreneurs to grow as it relates to social businesses, as it relates to community-based businesses, as it relates to businesses that impact the SDGs and those kind of things. And we have found that when we encourage our entrepreneurs to start those types of businesses, we are not getting the legislative environment to support it. So, for example, an entrepreneur would start a social or an environmental business, and there isn't a way in which they can set up that business in the Caribbean that would meet the needs of that business. So what we are looking for is, we are very happy for the information that is shared in this report, because it then becomes a basis for us to have a conversation with our policy creators and to help to make that environment more inclusive and make it more sustainable for our entrepreneurs. Because we recognize that in the Caribbean, our entrepreneurs contribute to more than 80% of our GDP. We have recognized also that with young people being active in economic activity, we reduce our chances of criminal elements, of delinquency, of persons not understanding that they too have a part to play in economic development. And so with all that came out of this report, and I think that it is a very, very good report, and it then helps us to address some of our challenges through the support of international development organizations. Because we in the Caribbean, we need to recognize that our business environment can help us to advance economically. And we have had so many challenges over the years. And so with that said, I would speak a little bit more about the Caribbean and how we are thriving, what we are doing, and how we can grow in our breakout session.
Sorry, Cardell. Yes, I think somebody's mic just came in. I think I was muted. Maybe you've been muted as well. That wasn't me. But yes, Cardell, thank you. Were you going to say more there? You've had about 5 minutes, but if there's anything more that you just wanted to say about Caribbean, I wasn't sure whether you'd finished or not.
No, I said I would go into more detail in the breakout room where we can then discuss more about the Caribbean.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much for your contribution. It's interesting that you referred to the kind of social business and social enterprise aspect there, actually. There was some ICR Facility technical assistance previously provided to, well, in Jamaica, and that was to develop a social enterprise policy which was specifically geared towards providing that legislative environment and other ecosystem components for supporting social enterprises going forward. So if people are interested in that line of things, then there is that example also on the ICR Facility website, and that's really led to useful things. And as we know, it tends to be young entrepreneurs that are setting up the social enterprises. It's a very young movement, so there is often a significant overlap there between what we're talking about today and social enterprises. Thank you, Cardell. That was really interesting and very helpful. Without further ado, I am going to introduce Muna Ngenda, who is a political economist, strategy advisor, fellow of Future Africa Forum, and Associate Director of Future Africa Consulting. With experience working in the youth policy space and supporting various government initiatives, Muna will provide insights on good policy making and business environment reform opportunities to support young entrepreneurs. So we are moving from the Caribbean to the continent of Africa, and delighted to have Muna here. Please, Muna, give us some insights. Thank you.
Thanks, Owen. Yes, I'd like to speak to how policymakers engage reform, and as you've said, informed by interactions, particularly with African governments. So I want to give a quick regional reflection and then a comment on a specific recommendation from the paper. So in terms of what enables reform or what makes reform successful, I found that three things tend to matter in Africa, at least. The posture of the administration, the participation of people outside of government, and the processes that go into actually implementing the reform. And so by posture, what I mean is whether in terms of structures, that's the roles, resources, reporting lines, and even the commitment of the top level commitment of the administration, is that geared to changing things? Is that geared to rapid innovation? Is that geared to being responsive? Or is it geared to being more responsive and, more conservative and maintaining the status quo? So no matter what's on paper, often the actual setup of first of all, the teams implementing the reform, but more so the top level administration can influence the success of the reform. Secondly, I wanted to speak quickly about participation in terms of what the evidence base is that is used to develop the policies. Often this can be quite abstract and statistical and doesn't really integrate the lived experience, especially young entrepreneurs. And even when you think about the broadness of the stakeholders who are invited to consultations, validation meetings, that's often quite narrow and quite elite. So thinking about how to sort of democratize, if you will, participation in these processes can also make them more successful. And then lastly, the accountability. Is there any sense of accountability to specific constituencies on the success of these processes? If it's sort of viewed as this is something the government is going to pursue and going to try, and if it works, all the best. And if it doesn't, there's no feedback loop as to what is working, what isn't working, and how this can be made better. Then yeah, if there's a lack of accountability, then that can limit the success of the reform. And then lastly, and I think this is covered in the paper as well, is the actual processes, so how clear, how transparent, how practical and pragmatic are the actual rules and regulations that come with these business environment reforms. And so in terms of African experience, I think there's a lot of variation in terms of posture and the sort of structures required. There is some progress, some innovation with structures such as the Office of the President or the Office of the Prime Minister taking a leading role in this, or sometimes in other countries, what you will have is a specific ministry taking the lead on this and corralling and coordinating the other ministries to a point in the paper about interministerial coordination. So some variation in terms of posture. Whereas participation and processes, I think broadly we're still lacking on those two, and there's a lot to be done. So happy to elaborate on that later. With the time I have left, I'd like to speak to recommendation 1, integrating youth and gender-based entrepreneurship objectives into national government agencies and economic development plans. I cannot agree more. This one really resonates with me because what I found broadly with national development plans across Africa is that youth entrepreneurship is often an add-on rather than a core element of the development strategy. So you have to think about the overall direction and orientation of the government. Typically, there's two that tend to be popular in Africa. One is a very liberalized economy, prioritize foreign direct investment approach, and that tends to prioritize large multinationals. A contrast to that is more directed economies and emphasis on structural transformation, on industrialization, but even that tends to prioritize parastatals or large established indigenous corporations. So on both sides, you have this emphasis on large operates, large conglomerates, and smaller SMEs and youth entrepreneurs tend to be left out of that. So even if you have really good policies, and these policies tend to fall under youth empowerment. So you have private sector development, and then youth empowerment is set off to the side almost as a charity effort. And you can have really good support measures there, but it is a side effort. And those measures often don't take into account that the youth are facing an overall situation of disadvantage, sort of a slanted playing field, with the governments thinking about the large champions of development. So which multinationals or which indigenous corporations can we really push to be leaders in different sectors? And a lot of the incentives, a lot of the regulations, a lot of the policies, a lot of the funding is directed at those champions, and young people are left out, young people are disadvantaged, young people are have to compete against that slanted playing field. Yeah, so just to close out, just to say that governments have to think about economic development with wider objectives than just pure GDP growth. And they have to consider SMEs as the engine of the economy rather than an afterthought. I think I will stop there. I had wanted to respond to recommendation 3. Everything I was going to say there, Cyprian covered really well. So just to say, I 100% agree with him. Yeah, so I'll stop there.
Great, thank you so much, Muna. Really interesting. I could take on lots of what you said and have a really good discussion. I think the one thing that I would say is in terms of the participation, today we're talking about youth entrepreneurship, which is the first in a 3-part series of products around youth empowerment within the ICR facility. The third one is going to focus on youth representation within public-private dialogues and so on. So please, people, if you're interested in that, do keep an eye out for when a report comes out around that, and also an accompanying webinar. And if you have particular insights, I'm sure we would love to hear from you. So thank you, Muna, for highlighting that, and for highlighting that still remains an issue across the board, really, in Africa, and certainly other continents and elsewhere. I'm certain we don't always do it especially well in Europe either. So thank you very much. Now, finally, but not least, I am going to introduce Patience Barandenge. She is a seasoned gender specialist with over 15 years of experience in the private sector and finance industries across Africa. She's currently a lecturer in women's economic empowerment and finance. And Patience is going to share her expertise on supporting BER, business environment reform. Lidas, please could I ask you to mute your microphone? Thank you. Patience is going to share her expertise on supporting business environment reform opportunities for young entrepreneurs, with a focus on strengthening gender inclusion and mainstreaming when implementing reform. So Patience, I forget whether you are going to be delivering this bit in French or not. I will leave you to decide, and please come on camera and do share your thoughts and reflections. Thank you.
Thank you, Owen. Merci beaucoup. Merci à Steven. Merci à Steven, en tout cas, pour le rapport. Je ne sais pas si, en même temps, les gens sont en train d'écouter le translation de ce que je suis en train de dire. Je ne sais pas si les gens sont en train d'écouter. Donc, je remercie en tout cas la facilité ICR pour cette opportunité, et je voudrais vraiment applaudir ce rapport de Steven par rapport à tout ce qui est les réformes dans le milieu des affaires par rapport aux jeunes entrepreneurs. Et donc, par rapport à notre expérience sur les recommandations en fait, qui sont faites sur le rapport, moi, je voudrais vraiment plus me baser sur tout ce qui est déjà réalisé au niveau de la République démocratique du Congo, d'où je viens, en tout cas pour information. Alors, je pense que tout à l'heure, le monsieur Cyprian, il a parlé de ce qui a été écrit dans le rapport concernant les barrières pour les jeunes entrepreneurs, notamment en parlant de collatéral, ce qui est la garantie, ce qui est compliqué. Alors, parmi les réformes qui ont été faites en République démocratique du Congo, depuis le mois de septembre 2022, il y a eu une ordonnance loi sur la promotion de l'entrepreneuriat et des startups. Et donc, cette ordonnance a vraiment reformé et changé, en tout cas, tout ce qui était facilité dans les climats des affaires pour les jeunes et les femmes en particulier. Et avec cette loi, il y a eu des programmes, en fait, pour accompagner les jeunes. Notamment, nous avons eu un projet depuis 2019 avec l'après-Covid l'après-Covid qui a vraiment secoué l'économie, et donc un programme en partenariat entre le gouvernement et la Banque mondiale qui a aidé beaucoup de jeunes à créer leur entreprise, et en tout cas en majorité les femmes. C'est un programme qui continue jusqu'aujourd'hui, un programme de 100 millions de dollars avec la Banque mondiale, et donc qui facilite cela. Dans les réformes encore qui ont été faites, donc il y a eu la création d'un fonds de garantie pour effectivement trouver des solutions pour le financement des jeunes entrepreneurs. On appelle ça FOGEC, donc Fonds de garantie pour l'entrepreneuriat congolais, et donc auquel les jeunes peuvent aussi s'appuyer, et les femmes, et donc afin de pouvoir garantir au fait leurs prêts auprès de différentes banques. Et donc c'est pour les jeunes créateurs et les startups, ce fonds-là. Il s'est aussi créé au fait en même temps un fonds spécial pour la promotion de l'entrepreneuriat et l'emploi des jeunes. Et donc, ce fonds-là, FONGEC, a été créé en partenariat avec KfW, la Banque mondiale et la Banque africaine de développement. Donc, on devrait quand même quelque part louer au fait ce qui se fait déjà par rapport aux recommandations au fait qui sont faites dans le rapport, et donc parler de ces avancements au fait qui sont en train de faire pour créer des réformes dans l'entrepreneuriat des jeunes et de femmes. Et donc beaucoup d'incubateurs ont été créés. Dans le cas des recommandations, en fait, on peut créer des incubateurs qui aident les jeunes, en fait, par rapport à leur expérience, mais il y a des limites, au fait, dans les incubations qui fait que les jeunes ne continuent pas à évoluer dans leur entreprise. Et donc, ce qu'il faudrait, c'est plus avoir des accélérateurs. Parce que quand ils arrivent à une phase, des fois, ils peuvent avoir le financement, mais ils sont limités. Mais quand il y a un accélérateur qui leur prend de la phase où ils sont arrivés jusqu'à une certaine maturité, et donc c'est vraiment de ça dont l'environnement a besoin, d'avoir plus d'accélérateurs pour essayer d'aider les jeunes. Et aussi, dans le cadre des politiques, vraiment, il faudrait que les gouvernants soient sensibles en tout ce qui est genre. En tout ce qui est genre, et j'ai vu ça dans la loi au fait de l'entrepreneuriat qui a été lancée en RDC, et qu'on a mis un accent sur les jeunes et les femmes dans cette loi, en disant que les taxes seront réduites pour eux, donc les femmes, les jeunes et les personnes vivant avec handicap, les taxes seraient revues pour eux, et avoir accès à l'assistance technique, des formations tout le temps. Et donc voilà en quelques mots ce que je pourrais partager sur l'expérience de ce qui se passe aujourd'hui en tant que réforme en République démocratique du Congo. Donc du reste, dans les groupes de discussion, je pourrais en dire un peu plus. Merci beaucoup, Owen.
Thank you so much, Patience. And it was, and thank you also to the translator. That was an excellent translation. And yes, great insights, Patience, and thank you. Really good to have some insights from DRC as well, geographically. So great to have you on board. I guess having the gender perspective reminds us that as much as we try and reflect on the particular challenge that are faced by youth, there are sort of intersecting characteristics that might make the challenge especially hard for certain groups of young people, women being one, disabled people, for example, being another, and so on. And there's a kind of intersectionality about some of these issues, which is an interesting but very real challenge for lots of people. So thank you for sharing some of your insights there. I will also add that there is a strong women's economic empowerment aspect to the ICR facility. And again, there is lots of information on the ICR website around that. And there have been various interventions that have a focus on women's economic empowerment that we have delivered previously and continue to deliver across Africa, the Caribbean and Pacific. So there might be interesting examples that people can draw from and get ideas from in respect to their own ecosystems and situations. Thank you, Patience, and thank you again to all of our speakers. I'm given time, I'm not going to invite any questions here unless there are any particular clarifications that are needed from any of the audience. I would suggest you put them in the chat. Yes, I haven't seen any come up so far, and I think in the interests of time, I am going to invite Stefan Felix to provide a bit of information about the ICR facility and the opportunities that it gives people to seek technical assistance on some of the issues that we've been talking about today. And after Stefan talks about that, we are going to move into some breakout rooms when the experts that we've heard from will also be contributing to more in-depth conversations within smaller groups. But Stefan Felix, are you here?
I am here. Yeah. Thank you.
Excellent news as always. Welcome to the table, and please take it away. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Owen. And I'll keep it short because I know we're running quite behind schedule, and I think the breakout areas are more interesting than what I have to say. So welcome everyone. I learned a lot already in the last 1.5 hours or 1 hour 20 minutes. So thank you for that. I am the interim team leader of the ICR Investment Climate Reform Facility, which is organizing the webinar for you today. So I'll just say a couple of words about the facility in as far as it might be relevant for you. The facility is funded by the EU, the OECPS, as well as BMZ and the British Council. It's implemented by 4 European organizations: British Council, GIZ, Expertise France, and the Dutch SNV. And really the core mandate of what we do, our main task, is to help public sector stakeholders, so for example, ministries, departments, as well as private sector stakeholders, not individual businesses, but chambers of commerce, for example, business associations, those sort of entities, help these entities reform the business environment in their country. So for example, a ministry would like to make it easier for businesses to go through the registration process for young entrepreneurs, for example, to register their business. That's the sort of thing where they can then submit an application to us. We will look at it and then potentially provide support to those entities. So we're a completely demand-based facility. We're active in the ACP region, so most of Africa and the Caribbean and the Pacific, and we provide expertise up to 90 days. So for example, you might need an expert in the commercial law, then we can contract that expert up to 90 days. 90 days is the maximum of what we can provide. It doesn't need to be done within 90 calendar days. It can also be done over 6 months or 12 months. But in terms of expert days, it's 90 days. It's very much a short to medium term type intervention. Our main focus is women's economic empowerment. So we would be looking at business environment reforms with a particular gender lens to ensure that the needs of women are taken into account. And of course, and you can see that through this webinar, the topic of youth is equally important to us. You can already go to the next slide, even the next after this. I think I've covered everything that's on this particular slide. Here you can see some examples of the type of support we can provide, in particular as it's related to the topics of this webinar. We can support policy dialogues, for example, around youth entrepreneurship policy. That's an example. You know, it could be any type of policy that impacts the way businesses operate. We can help in terms of mainstreaming gender in existing policy and regulatory framework. As I mentioned, gender, women's economic empowerment is certainly our priority. You can see a few more sort of examples here. I don't think I need to go through all of them, but it's just to say, if you want more information about the ICR facility, go to our website, icr-facility.eu. There's lots of information there. There's also lots of resources there. Partly Marika shared a lot of them already in the chat. And there's also the request forms. If you feel like you would like to have support, then there's an online request form. It's fairly straightforward to fill out. You just need to be clear what it is that you need. That's the main thing. and then you can submit a request and we would get in contact and discuss further. Yeah, and that's it. I'll leave it at that and hand back to Owen.
Thank you so much, Stefan. That's great. And I would invite people to keep this opportunity in mind as they go into the breakout sessions, and for chairs of those breakout sessions to listen out for potential ICR ideas that could form the basis of requests. So we would like to give 20 minutes ideally to these breakout sessions. I'm going to stick with that, although we might bring you back slightly early. It might be more like 15 minutes. So these breakout sessions are going to be organized by the thematic areas that we heard from earlier in terms of each of our experts. So group one is going to offer discuss the issue from the perspective of young entrepreneurs. Group two is going to be discussing the issue from the perspective of private sector development actors and businesses and so on. Group three is going to be focused on the sort of policy development perspective, and group four is going to be focused on gender and gender mainstream. It's important to say that group four is going to be delivered in French. So if you are solely a French speaker, I would suggest you go to group four. Now, for each of those groups, we want you to consider the same three questions, obviously from your respective perspective within discussion group. The first question, what are the key challenges for supporting business environment reforms for young entrepreneurs? What are the challenges to current reform efforts? Number two, what can be done to help overcome these challenges? And number three, what initiatives have you seen elsewhere that can support young entrepreneurs? So ideally, we're looking for answers from those three questions from the particular perspective of each group. But the main thing is to just try and have a good conversation and to bring your experience to the table and have a bit of a discussion and reflection on some of the issues that you've heard about. So I'm now in each room, there is going to be a representative from the ICR facility, and there is going to be a representative from Challenges, I believe, and there is also going to be one of the experts aligning with each of those thematic areas. So I think we're going to give you 15 minutes in most likelihood, just so we can feed back and have a bit of some concluding remarks at the end. And I invite somebody to set up the breakout rooms, and it will then be with you to decide which one you're going into. But I can't immediately, there is a tab for breakout rooms now at the bottom of your screen. So if you click on that button, that should give you the option of joining one or other out of those four options. So I will look forward to hearing back from you in 15 minutes or so. I'm assuming that everybody, or as many people as possible, have made it back safely to this main room. I hope you all had some fruitful conversations and discussions within your respective breakout rooms. Apologies if they felt a bit rushed, but I do want to finish before the hour. I am just going to invite very quick feedback of no more than 2 minutes from a representative from each of the breakout rooms, starting with somebody from your room, please, Christina. Or maybe was it going to be the ICR facility person within your room? Please step forward, somebody from the...
I will do that one.
Thank you, Irene.
Okay, great. So thank you. In our room, there are 10 of us, and the question for question one, the challenges we identified, 4 main challenges. We said there were no channel or mechanisms for young people to provide feedback on the reforms that are being designed for them. So the lack of dialogue on the part of policymakers. There was limited access to information, so the information that are available are sometimes not shared easily to young people. There's a difficulty in accessing finance, and then the whole bureaucracy kills the whole ideation stage. There's burdensome requirement, there's no structure. So these were the challenges that young entrepreneurs were facing. In terms of solution, we did discuss that it will be great to have user-friendly digital platforms that have all the information, guidelines, A to Z process in setting up businesses and establishing them, and then have a user-friendly digital platform or social media platforms that policymakers can use to receive feedback on reforms. I mean, we know that they do usually use town halls, but in this day and age, young people are more on social media and apps. So policymakers should also consider those in terms of receiving feedback from on policies, and then also consider courses at the tertiary institutions on entrepreneurship to introduce young people to that sector. And then lastly, the last question, we did mention the Tony Elumelu entrepreneurship work that's ongoing in Nigeria and some parts of Nigeria and some parts of Africa, and then the MasterCard program on entrepreneurship in Ghana. So that's what's from my group. I hope we made it 2 minutes.
That was incredible, Irene. Thank you very much. Fantastic. And Stefan, that has set a very high bar for you, but based on your previous performance, I've got a lot of faith. Please.
Yeah, I speak fast. I usually speak fast anyway. Anyway, we had a good discussion. We had people from all sorts, Barbados and Ghana and Mozambique and Nigeria and so on and so forth. Some of the issues that we identified were that is a segregated support network for entrepreneurship. So lots of sort of actors working in silos and often even competing against each other because they want to be, you know, the important support organization. We talked a little bit about informal sector, and that for a lot of these enterprises, in particular micro enterprises, it makes complete sense for them to stay informal, because if they go formal, all the bureaucracy that comes with it is too much for them to handle. Talked a little bit about that there is lots of support around access to finance, but less around accessing the right markets and knowing sort of who to sell to. My colleague mentioned sort of there's lack of competitive intelligence in terms of entrepreneurs sort of knowing where to best sell to. We talked about public-private dialogue, and there we sort of established that young entrepreneurs are actually included often in these dialogue processes. But what we sometimes see is that their voices aren't really heard. You know, their recommendations aren't really taken forward, whereas the recommendations of bigger, more established players, big companies, they're heard far more frequently. Yes, and then of course the youth doesn't have quite enough sort of resources and expertise to actually engage in public-private dialogue. So that is a little bit of an issue as well. Yes, and then we talked about one potential problem to overcome the informality concern is around is there opportunities to create cooperatives that are registered, and under these cooperatives to then have individual businesses that are not registered to somehow share the burden a little bit around the registration and combine. So the best of both worlds of staying informal versus having a little bit of some formalization going on. Yeah, and that'll be it from my side.
Thank you very much. That's really interesting, especially that last point around formality, informality. I think that might have been something that was included within the action plan for the Rwanda work, which is something that was done under the ICR facility, which again, for people interested, is a really useful example to look into on the ICR website. Muna, are you willing and happy to feedback from our group?
Yes, I will come back to willing and happy. So very quickly, the challenges were around implementation costs of actually supporting youth. You know, it's fine for the government to mandate youth support, but then when you get to the actual providers, whether that's BDS, etc., just implementation costs are an issue, just a thorny issue to get around. Also, policy engagement is a challenge. It continues to be poor. The government does not reach out to CSOs, private associations, etc. They often have to reach out to the government. And then around accountability, there's a question of who is willing and happy. The government tends not to have an incentive. So does it fall to development partners? Does it fall to research institutes? You know, who has the incentive, the capacity, and the embeddedness to actually make those make accountability work? In terms of challenges, we spoke about, in terms of solutions to these challenges, the direction seemed to be about doing more than paper solutions. So even like around engagement, the targets have to be more than numbers of people consulted, but actually taking their feedback and working with it. Accountability has to be more than just setting up watchdogs, but do you have actual flexibility, adaptive implementation frameworks so you can learn and improve as you go? And then lastly, on positive examples of initiatives, the direction here seemed to be about grassroots, decentralized, more local, more informal, just bringing it down closer to the ground. Seems, yeah, but those are the things that tended to have worked better.
Thank you very much. That's excellent. I was fearful the way you said you were going to come back to willing and happy, like you were going to follow up with me, but I like the way you incorporated it. Perfect. Thank you very much. And finally, from the final group, which was looking more at the gender side of things, I think Malik, if he's here, was going to feedback.
Yep, thank you, Owen. Actually, Patience agreed to give feedback on our discussion. So please go ahead, Patience.
Ok, merci beaucoup Malik. Et donc, oui, dans notre groupe, nous avons parlé de tout ce qui était considération du genre dans les réformes qui pouvaient se passer dans l'environnement des affaires des jeunes et des femmes. Alors, nous avons mis en exergue ce qui se passe dans les deux pays, le Sénégal et la RDC, où il y a quand même des efforts qui se font. Donc, dès le début de mon intervention, j'avais dit qu'il faudrait aussi louer ce qui se passe aussi de bien. Mais après, dans ce qui se passe de bien, les lacunes qu'il peut y avoir, au fait, où dans les quelques réformes, c'est que, de un, c'est quelque chose qui ne touche pas tout le monde. Dans les programmes qui peuvent être lancés, on a donné l'exemple du super projet au fait de l'Union européenne, de Team European Initiative, qui est un programme pour l'Afrique, mais voilà, donc ça ne touche pas tous les pays de l'Afrique, et donc les questions étaient comment se font les choix, au fait, de ces pays-là qui sont bénéficiaires de ce genre d'initiatives et tout. Et donc, par rapport aux solutions en fait, auxquelles on a réfléchi, c'est en tout cas d'avoir une budgétisation sensible au genre. Les ministères, en tout cas appropriés par rapport à tout ce qui est climat des affaires, on parle des ministères de l'économie, des finances, de l'entrepreneuriat et tout ça, devraient, dans leur budgétisation, essayer d'inclure tout ce qui est sensible au genre. Et nous avons parlé de mettre en exergue ce qui était l'équité par rapport à l'égalité, pour dire que tout le genre, toutes les personnes ne peuvent pas avoir les mêmes chances, c'est-à-dire déjà les contraintes qu'ont les jeunes femmes ne sont pas les mêmes que les jeunes hommes, les jeunes hommes, et donc du coup, il faudrait leur donner un peu plus de chance. Alors dans le cas de l'équité, on donne pour que tout le monde puisse accéder aux mêmes chances, on essaie d'élever le niveau. Par exemple, les femmes ont un programme déjà d'éducation, et donc il faudrait essayer d'adapter ces réformes-là à leur niveau. Il y a aussi le volet de la communication, il faut vulgariser parce que beaucoup de programmes qui se font, j'ai donné l'exemple de la RDC par rapport à cette loi qui a été lancée en septembre 2022. Tout le monde n'est pas informé. Tout le monde n'est pas informé et tout l'accès à l'information vulgarisée sur les réformes aussi pour que les gens, en fait, qui sont censés être bénéficiaires puissent être au courant de ça. Et en dernier lieu, on a parlé de what next, c'est-à-dire, OK, il y a les initiatives, il y a les réformes, vous avez eu l'assistance technique, vous avez eu les fonds. Maintenant, quid de ce qui se passe après? Donc, nous avons parlé plus d'avoir des accélérateurs pour faire les suivis de ces gens-là. Parce qu'après des initiatives comme ça, dans le cas des réformes, les bénéficiaires, des fois, ils sont aux oubliettes. On ne sait pas ce qu'ils sont devenus. Donc, pour faire le business case, il faut suivre ces gens-là et essayer de vulgariser maintenant la suite ou la continuité de ceux qui sont devenus après, ce qui a été aussi dit dans le super rapport de Steven. Et donc, je vous remercie. Malik, j'espère que j'ai tout parcouru.
Oui, c'était parfait. Merci beaucoup, Patience.
Thank you so much, Patience, and thank you to that group. So we are past the hour, so thank you so much for bearing with us, everybody. Thank you for your super contributions across all sorts of different themes. A massive thank you to Stephen for doing the research and for leading that and producing such an insightful report. A massive thank you to our 4 expert speakers today. I think you've really brought some fantastic thematic insights on different topics, but also it's great to hear from your different geographies and the regions and countries that you cover. We'd love to continue engaging with you and keep you in the loop with some of this stuff. As always, a massive support to our ICR Facility team and for delivering all this stuff so well. Also, thank you to our translators. That was really useful, and it was great having you on board as well. I'm sure I'm forgetting people to thank, but do bear with me. Hopefully you've come out with an idea that the ICR facility is a facility that can help with supporting some of the issues that we've been talking around youth entrepreneurship, also other areas as well. So please do go onto our website. As I said, this is the first in a series of knowledge products and reports and webinars. So the next one is likely to be about youth employment more generally, and the one following that will be about youth representation on public-private dialogues. I've taken a lot away today around integration of ministry policies, around strengthening the tailored support that is available to young entrepreneurs, and certainly about coordination and regulatory reform and so on. And I really hope that you all have as well. There are some questions for you to answer, which we'd be very grateful. They're only going to take a minute or so, less than that. So please do select the right boxes before you go, and that will give us some useful data for improving these moving forward. And please do follow the links that are on your screen as well for any further information. And do get in touch with any of the ICR facility team if you'd like further information on anything. Also a big thank you to our funders, and who are represented by Joanna and ACP on today. Always great to have you on board. And thank you, and enjoy the rest of your days, your evenings, your nights, and I hope to cross paths again soon. Take care, everybody. Bye.